So following a discussion that I had with a candidate yesterday about her options for working from home moving forward, I wanted to put out a post giving you my thoughts on that, because it is a question I'm being asked a lot at the moment. Do you think companies will offer 100% remote working moving forward? Do you think there's going to be an increase in this? Is it a trend that we should be adopting? In my mind, this is such a complicated matter, which I think goes hand in hand with a very complicated situation that we're in at the moment. You know, COVID-19 and lockdown is affecting businesses and people all over the world, but in very, very different ways. And with regards to the working from home aspect of things, I was reading an article actually this morning in The Guardian, which I'll share. Fascinating article about working from home, and actually when the idea really first came about and when futurologists started thinking, you know, could this be the future of work for the UK in particular? So this was back in the 70s. And this is when networked computers were being installed in homes, and as I say, businesses were probably rubbing their hands with glee, thinking about all the overheads that they could save and wages that they could cut. So there are businesses that adopted this kind of approach very early on. There was one lady called Stephanie Shirley, who ran a business called F International, came upon the idea of really looking to hire a predominantly female workforce, so programmers, funnily enough, women who perhaps had found that their careers had stalled due to marriage or motherhood, and worked to offer that as an opportunity for them to get back into work. And actually that's something that I have heard mirrored from a couple of companies that I've spoken to in the last few months. So they've started to think about, actually, is there a real untapped workforce there for us to engage with and get access to now? People, particularly women who are coming back from maternity leave or have taken, you know, a number of years off to be stay-at-home parent and need some flexibility or need to be able to work from home full-time due to commitments with children. So I think there's certainly, you know, this situation has triggered a different way of thinking. You know, people are looking to innovate, they're looking to adapt, they're looking to be flexible in terms of the way that they run their business. But my personal opinion in terms of whether or not I think we're suddenly going to see everybody working from home, you know, or predominantly working from home is no, I don't think that's going to happen for a number of reasons. I don't think it can happen. I don't think it's actually the right thing to do for the modern workplace. So amazingly, just last year, so 2019, only 5% of the UK labour workforce worked from home 100%, so we're 100% remote, which is such a small proportion. I haven't managed to find the figures yet as to exactly how many people or what the percentages of the UK current workforce are working from home, but it's going to be obviously, you know, enormous. But in terms of our thoughts, my colleague and I, Colin, were discussing this yesterday, in terms of our thoughts on why we don't think it's going to work as a blanket model for businesses. You know, just from a human perspective, I mean, I work in a job where psychology, language, interpersonal skills, relationships are really at the heart of what we do. You know, people think of recruitment as a sales-based job, and maybe it was once, but now it's, for me anyway, personally, much more about, as I say, relationships predominantly, and then all the little, you know, parts of that, you know, how you build a relationship, how you build rapport, how you build engagement, how you listen well. And all of that is underpinned, you know, by meeting people and talking to people and getting to know them and understand them and what drives them and what motivates them. And from a client perspective, what businesses want from their employees. You know, there's so much work these days that goes into the employer brand and employee engagement, training, development. So I think, you know, businesses nowadays have really shifted in terms of how they manage their people, their workforces, how they organise them. And, you know, apprenticeships, graduate recruitment, I think is really so much more rounded, structured, valued within companies now. And I think if you were looking to embed a grad within a business, somebody who has absolutely no experience of working in a business environment, particularly in an office, how would you upskill them? How would you enable them to fit in and feel comfortable and understand how business works if they are remote and isolated? And I think, so much of getting to learn about a company and how it operates is by being within those physical four walls and interacting with people in the same room. And it's all those micro interactions as well that you have with other people that builds trust and rapport and credibility, and how you can inspire people and lead from the front. So I think particularly for junior candidates and graduates, I think it would be much more difficult to really successfully bring them on board and get them to realise their potential. So I think that was one point that we kind of thought about. I think for me as well, it also really depends on the role. I of course acknowledge that there are many matrix structures that are being run across the world. There are obviously lots of remote teams that businesses outsource work to, but that work is very much often task-based, and particularly in the field that I operate in, obviously data, it's technical. So of course it's possible for you to have and manage successful remote teams. Can you run an entire business remotely? Can you offer 80% of people's working week on a remote basis across every department? I don't think it's possible. I think there are some jobs that are, it's absolutely vital that you are in the business, interacting with people on a human level. We were also discussing yesterday that the middle management out there are probably tearing their hair out at the moment, very frustrated that they can't observe their workers on a daily basis, and as much as that's something humorous, I suppose, to kind of mull, I think actually there's a really serious point there for me personally as a manager as well. I need to be observing what my team are doing, if they're making mistakes, if they're doing something really well, that feedback on a daily basis, the small wins, observing an opportunity or identifying an opportunity for training. You're going to miss those kind of things if you're not in the office with those people or in the same environment with those people. So I think that's a really key thing as well. If you've got a 100% remote based team, of course, there's a positive side there, to trusting somebody to kind of get on with things, and there's I suppose a positive in that they will potentially learn themselves and kind of find a solution themselves rather than coming to you as a manager or going to a peer, and there's a balance there. I think again, as a manager, you have to let people make mistakes and kind of learn themselves, but ultimately good managers lead from the front and lead by example and are inspiring. And if you're not physically there to demonstrate how to do something, or that this is what you could be doing, in a few years' time, this is kind of what my day job looks like as well. This is, all those elements just get lost, and I think they're absolutely vital. Beyond that as well, I think, again, just going back to the human element, I think, reading somebody's emotions and body language is really key as well. If they're having a bad day, it's, you adapt the way that you communicate with them and that you manage them. And actually, if you don't have that context, there might be negative repercussions, but all of that as well is about building a relationship with somebody that you work with, whether you manage them or whether they're a peer. So I think those kind of things can get lost as well. So I think overall, I'd be very surprised if we end up as a predominant remote workforce across the UK. I think realistically it's going to take a long time for us to really see the results of this situation and how businesses do adapt in the short term, and whether that becomes a long-term thing. I think there will be short-term policies in place for return to office, return to work. Those that can work remotely or want to work remotely, let's have that discussion. I think it's going to be very circumstantial, case-by-case basis. I think the massive positive is that businesses are going to be far more open to hiring people who need flexibility in remote working. The lady that I was talking to yesterday, her specific circumstance is really interesting. Actually, it's a great case study, and I'm going to keep in touch with her and feedback on how this kind of rolls out. But she's on furlough at the moment. She's an analyst that we placed at an agency, and they are unfortunately starting the redundancy process. So she's part of a pool of candidates that are being considered, and her other half has actually just secured a position in Australia. So they are going to be likely moving to Australia within a couple of months. And she posed the question to her employer, this is the situation. Would you actually consider me as part of that consultancy process? If you did choose to keep me on, would you consider keeping me on 100% remotely? I'm going to be moving abroad. And they actually said yes. So that was really encouraging for me to hear that. Obviously they're one of our clients, so this is good for us moving forward if we are going to be helping them to grow when there's, again, hopefully a bit of a bounce back from this. But the fact that they're that open-minded, whereas I don't think they would have been 3-6 months ago, it is really encouraging. And I think for us as recruitment consultants in this market, my approach will be, moving forward, let's bring our clients the right candidates, the best candidates, and be honest about the caveats, which is what we would have done previously. And that's how we have placed people that have flexible working requirements or need part-time. And we have placed people successfully on a part-time basis into what were permanent roles, permanent briefs. But I think now we're going to have such a wide range of individual circumstance for our clients to consider. We're going to have to just, be honest about those kind of candidate situations, and just have a real solutions focused approach. This is a great candidate for this role. However, they are going to require X, Y, and Z. And I think hopefully we're going to have a much more positive response from clients moving forward, now that they've seen that the business model can work to an extent. So that's kind of our early opinion on this situation. It is very, very early on. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things develop, and we're going to be making a real point of having those discussions with our clients, getting feedback from candidates who do have certain requirements. Have you discussed this with the end employer? What's their feedback been? So we can kind of share that with you on how we think what the future of work looks like, but how that employer landscape is developing and changing, and how the candidate landscape is changing and developing as well. So I hope that's useful. I would love to hear any feedback or comments that you guys have from your existing employers, how they are adapting to the current situation, if they have laid out plans for going back into the office yet, or even loosely talked about them. What are those ideas? What do those plans look like? We're in early discussions at Blue Pelican about that as well. But it's very early days. I think something else that we've spotted locally, where we're based actually down in Kent, is that a lot of the office space in Tunbridge Wells is flipping to a kind of flexible working space. There's that option versus the kind of permanent rental option. So we may well see a lot more of that, the kind of WeWork model being adopted by property management companies across the UK. So that certainly in the interim seems like it would be a sensible idea. Whether that will again be maintained long term, we've yet to see. So thanks to the candidate for the very interesting discussion yesterday and posing those questions. It gave me the idea for today's content. As I say, please feedback, pop some comments in the boxes below. Would love to hear your thoughts and your ideas, not only for us, but obviously, as I say, for our clients and for candidates as well.